everybody, thanks for watching. Just a quick reminder that Saturn and Satan Final is now available, as well as Stock Market Final. Make sure you guys grab those if you haven't seen them. For Never Pay Again members, as I talked about on the live, make sure you guys grab that link. I emailed everybody the link. Check your emails. I sent the emails out again for you guys to grab the link. So when you get that link for Frequency and Vibration Volume 3, as well as the God of 2025, you will also see those two videos, Stock Market Final and Saturn Satan Final. So if you paid the $9.99 and you got those two videos, now you can go back to Podia and you'll see those new two videos there. You guys do not have to purchase it. You don't have to pay the $9.99 if you don't want to. You can go on Merkabah Academy and it is there. As I said, the reason why I did that is so we can backdoor Podia. As I said, they only allow 100 emails. So to get around that, so I can be able to send everybody the latest videos on Podia, when you purchase that $9.99 two videos, I can keep uploading the next videos in that same link. So that's how we get around the whole 100 emails. So all I got to do is just upload the newest video onto that link every time it comes out. But again, it will still be on Merkabah Academy. I just did that in case there's an incident where you have an issue or you just want to download the video quickly, but you'll still be able to go to the Never Pay Again section and see those videos. It'll be right there, as well as the latest 12 or 15 videos. So that's how we get around the whole issue with Podia. And, make sure you guys grab that so you can get through that whole issue. Also, thanks to everybody who participated in my third live stream. I appreciate everybody who came out. It was quick. Well, it wasn't quick. It was like almost 3 hours. But talked about a lot. Everybody understand what's going on now with Biden dropping out of the presidential race and Kamala Harris stepping in as the nominee. And, she's running. And we know what happened. Trump beat the last female that was running for president, which was Hillary Clinton. So, it would be crazy if she picks her as the vice president nominee or what have you. So we'll see. That's what everybody's, waiting for, to see who she's going to choose. It's crazy to expect. We all knew something was going to happen with Biden. Nobody expected him to make it through all this. What is he, 81? Another 4 years would be crazy. He's at the end of his, his life. He needs to just go, chill with the grandkids, retire, whatever. The guy been in, service in the political scene for over 40 years, like 48 years, something like that. So it's crazy for them to basically try to get him to run. And we all figured something would happen with that situation. I certainly didn't think he would make it through this far. But it's crazy how long they waited. November is around the corner. It's crazy how long the Democrats waited to even, get him to step down or even, put her out there as being their best choice to run against Trump. But it just goes to show you how all this shit is, is bullshit. They already know who the president's going to be. We all know this. We know how this stuff works. No election is going to decide who the president will be. We all understand that. But it's weird because, it just gives you more insight and more understanding for you to see that it's all some pit bullshit, because this is sloppy. It's really sloppy when you look at it. It's just weird that you would wait so long to drop out and to even give her a shot. She had a better chance having a full campaign to run for president, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But when you look at everything that happened with Trump so far, his following has gotten larger. A lot more people have gotten behind him. So it's going to be a real uphill battle for her, and trying to win against him. This is as far as like popularity or what have you. We all understand, as I said. We all know. They already know who's going to win. But they always do this. It's always something towards the end. And it can go left, it can go right. We don't know what the agenda really is. But it's definitely intriguing now to see how this stuff is shaping out. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. As I said, to me, you can't have a presidential election. You can't have no election that's electoral. We have, mail-in ballots that you can count. But to me, there's no way, especially with the way technology is today, that we can have a legit, presidential election or any type of election with electoral votes where we don't know what's happening. They say this person won. We don't know who the hell won. We don't know what's going on. We don't know who the people actually picked because they're telling us, and we think that that's what happened. We're going by this, media who has notoriously lied to us and put out a bunch of propaganda, put us against each other. It's bullshit. There's no way we can trust the press and trust CNN and freaking all these people to give us a true count. It's no way. So to me, I think that's one of those things that should always be the old way. And we just going to have to take the time, to do a paper count where votes are counted, under camera, and people can see the count no matter how long it takes. If we wanted to watch it, we can watch it. We can see the count. And it just should be like a bunch of people counting votes and something like that to where we know that this person was legitimately picked for president, which, that sounds all well and good in a system that is not controlled, but even still, it's controlled. Like I said, when you really think about a president and the whole notion of a presidency and a person just running and then walking into the White House and taking a job, like, how does that work? It just don't make sense when you really look at it. Any job that you take this, we're talking about the highest level corporate job, and you walk into a company, you have to have knowledge. You have to have like some type of understanding on how to do this. Trump, he's a real estate investor. Like, this guy comes in and becomes president. Well, when he did win in 2016, and we're supposed to allow this dude to run the free world. I mean, just think about how negligent that is as a company. If you allow somebody to come in off the street who got some background or whatever, nothing to do with your company, but to come in and run your company. It don't make sense. It don't make sense for, America to allow something like that to happen. It should definitely be somebody who's been in politics or has a background in any of this stuff. His foreign relations is off. There's no way you can know how to run this entire country and deal with these other countries, especially at a time right now when we're, possibly going to war. So this is some of the challenges that they believe that she'll face because, Trump got the woman's vote. I mean, women voted for him over Hillary running. So Hillary would have been the first woman president, but, more women voted for Trump. So that's weird to look at. And it's probably going to be the same situation here, especially with, Kamala, not being white. And we'll see. We'll see. Like I said, again, stuff is all set up. It's WWE. They got they know who the winner is going to be and what the agenda is already going to be is already set. Somebody sent me the whole Simpsons meme with Camilla Harris dressed just like how Lisa was dressed when she became the first woman president on The Simpsons. So it's like The Simpsons did it again. But something to look at, something to think about. So we'll see what happens and how it all unfolds. It's a lot with that. I just really, I really don't even get into presidential politics or any type of politics for real. As far as actively, voting and stuff like that, it's just, we all know it doesn't matter who wins, they're going to win. So yeah, anybody who's still having issues with the login, still working on that, getting that straightened out. It's a lot of people sent emails. I'm going to be updating accounts and taking care of all that stuff. So, stand by for that. Make sure you guys, again, clear your browser cache, restart your computer, try different internet browsers. You should be able to log straight in to Merkabah Academy without any issues. I don't understand what the issue is. I'm waiting on WordPress to see what's going on. They're supposedly working on it. But it works fine on my computers and a bunch of other people's computers because I see them on the Academy. So, stand by for that. We'll get a permanent fix for that soon. So yeah, we still updating the site anyway, so it's all good. Probably once we finish updating the site completely, it probably fix all the issues because I have to go back and backtrack to make sure plugins and everything like that works. So code as well. So yeah, we're gonna get into this video, and thanks to everybody who again participated in the live. Make sure you guys grab Saturn Satan Final. It is the last one. As I said, it's the best. Save the best for last, and you'll see how everything leads up to what we talked about in that video. Stock market final is out. Make sure you guys grab that. And I have Black and Morris is coming up next, and a few other videos. We'll get back into the Biblical Bible series. Those videos are going to be coming, and a lot more. So yeah, stay tuned. Thanks again, guys, and yeah, let's get into this video. Now, when you pay attention with Zeus, you could just see, one, how he is exactly like the God of the Bible, does good things, does bad things, evil stuff. You can see how these people, the Greek gods, have sort of emotions like men. It's the same thing with God, jealousy and rage or what have you. And you can see how, it's bad things that happen to the regular people. Same thing in the Bible. And when you just keep on reading the stories and understanding how you can compare them to Greek mythology, I mean, it's crazy. It's so easy to do so, to compare them, because a lot of the stuff just fits. The terminology, the wording is exactly the same in Greek mythology as it is in the Bible. So we know we have heaven and hell. You have Hades, you have Elysium. So remember in Elysium being like heaven, just like in the movie, Elysium was beautiful. And this is where like rich people live, and, you had to be selected to get up there or what have you. It's the same thing. Elysium was basically heaven. And a lot of scholars, all of the people who I listed before, all of the scholars all wrote about Elysium and about what it was. So now this is what Pindar had to say. This is Pindar Odes. For those living a righteous life, the good receive a life free from toil, not scraping with the strength of their arms the earth, nor the water of the sea, for the sake of a poor sustenance. But in the presence of the honored gods, those who gladly kept their oaths enjoy a life without tears, while the others undergo a toil that is unbearable to look at. Those who have persevered 3 times on either side to keep their souls free from all wrongdoing follow Zeus's road to the end, to the tower of Kronos, where ocean's breeze blow around the island of the blessed, and flowers of gold are blazing, some from splendid trees on land, while water nurtures others. With these wreaths and garlands of flowers they entwine their hands according to the righteous counsel of Rhadamanthus, whom the great father, the husband of Re, whose throne is above all others, keeps close beside him as his partner. That is from the Odes of Pindar. Now, when you pay attention to Greek mythology, you have some scholars who write Kronos being the god, the ruler of the underworld. But Rhadamanthus basically roams the underworld and roams Elysium, I should say, but he is a judge of the underworld. Rhadamanthus, his name translates to soothsayer, to a person who conquers, one who conquers or what have you. So Rhadamanthus is also put there in Elysium. He is the son of Zeus and Europa. Remember, Europa is where Europe comes from. Now, according to a lot of Greek scholars, a lot of Greeks who wrote about Elysium was actually on Earth. It was supposed to be at the far western edge for all you flat earthers, edge of the planet, of the Earth. So now this is what Plutarch had to say about Elysium. Now I'm going to read this briefly. Plutarch says, "These are 2 in number, separated by a very narrow strait. They are 10,000 furlongs distance from Africa, and are called the Islands of the Blessed." Now this is what Diodorus said. Diodorus, in his first book, suggested that the Elysian fields, which were much celebrated by Grecian poetry, corresponded to the beautiful plains in the neighborhood of Memphis, which contained the tombs of that capital city of Egypt. He further intimated that the Greek prophet Orpheus composed his fable about the afterlife when he traveled to Egypt and saw the customs of the Egyptians regarding the rights of the dead. Now, Diodorus' first book, Library of History, Book 1. So now, when you look at the synopsis, it's saying here, Egypt, the origin of the world and of civilized life. The gods, the first men. Egypt, the land, the Nile, and its flooding. Egypt, the first kings. Egypt, customs and religion. This is why I tell people to follow Diodorus, because when you understand what he wrote in his writings, he basically is one of the only Greek scholars, besides Herodotus, who a lot of people distort his work
who basically was giving it to you straight up, was telling you that, the Greeks basically, when you pay attention, is taking this stuff from ancient Egypt and repurposing it for their own gain, for their own benefit. So when you get into a lot of his work, he goes into what the ancient Egyptians was talking about. Now, let me point something out, because you're going to get confused, a lot of people. All of this stuff, and this is going to sound crazy, it's going to make a lot of people skeptical and doubtful, but you got to understand, you can't trust none of this stuff. You have to go into every single bit of all of these scholars and their work and think about it and say, well, possibly somebody came in there and changed what was said, or took out or added some things to a lot of the works. It's very tough. This is why you got to keep doing research and keep looking before you just accept what they were saying, because a lot of stuff possibly was changed. But when you can find what these people are talking about from multiple scholars and find actual facts and proof to back up what they were speaking to, then you can rely on a lot of these scholars more so. This is what I have found to be true with Diodorus and with Herodotus, which I know a lot of people say Herodotus is not proven true, but a lot of stuff that's important, his works is proven. So I pay attention to these Greek scholars because a lot of them really put out this information, because what you got to understand was everybody wasn't in agreement on what happened, plain and simple. And you had a lot of people who started to understand the spirituality of the ancient Egyptians and what they was doing and how all that was taken away. And a lot of people didn't have faith in the direction that the Greeks was headed. But when you take a step back and look at it all again, we see this stuff dealing with the same things we see in biblical religion. We look at Egyptian mythology and we see it's talking about the same things corresponding with Greek mythology, Greek mythology corresponding with Egyptian mythology. All this stuff is talking about the same stuff. And as we understand it, going back to energy, vibration, frequency, and what have you, when you get really deep into it. So we see clearly in Greek mythology that they're talking about the planet Saturn. We see clearly that the moons of Saturn are named after Greek gods. All of this is pointing to Saturn. Again, when you start getting into this stuff, it's a reason this stuff is corresponding with these things. And when you get deeper into it, you start to understand what they're talking about, as we'll get into down the line. But suffice it to say that when you look at Egyptian mythology, that they are speaking about Saturn as well. And then, of course, they're not going to go and name it as Saturn. But since we understand that Greek mythology took from Egyptian mythology, we can look at it and say that they were speaking about the same thing. So, as I said before, when the Egyptians are referring to the sun, I believe they're talking about Saturn as a sun and not about the sun we see when we wake up in the morning. Everything, all the aspects that they are speaking about fits Saturn being the sun and not our sun being what they're talking about, because our sun does not have an eye. Our sun does not fit with the description of the the pineal gland and what everything is speaking to, as far as the Saturn looking like an eye and it having all the characteristics that fit Saturn that does not fit our sun. So clearly it's talking about Saturn. And don't get me wrong, you have the ancient Egyptians, of course, referring to the sun that we see today as well. You just have to understand when they're talking about what. Now, it's going to make a lot more sense when we get down the line and start talking about this more. But now remember, I talked about in Ancient History, Volume 1, the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians' land being part of the Egyptian Empire. And you got to remember, the Phoenicians worshipped El, so did the Canaanites. So when we find El, we know we're talking about the Phoenicians, we know we're talking about the Canaanites, or the Phoenician Canaanites, and we know El to be Saturn. Now, what they'll tell you when you look and you start digging and doing this research, that another name for El was Elah, I-L-A, Elah. And again, this is why I tell you, do your own research. Don't pay attention to what these people say unless it fits, unless you can really get proof for it. Now, Elah wasn't another name for El. Elah was the moon. Elah is the moon god. This is what it's referring to. See, it says a rare spelling, Elah. No, it's talking about a moon god, the moon god. So we can also find Elah in Hinduism. So Elah in Hinduism is the progenitor of the lunar dynasty. So what is the lunar dynasty? It says lunar dynasty. In Hindu mythology, the lunar dynasty is one of the four principal houses of the Kshatriya Varna, or warrior ruling caste. This legendary dynasty was descended from the moon, while the other principal houses, the solar dynasty, claims descent from the sun. Then it says here Soria, or Sora, Soras. What are we talking about here? We're talking about Islam. So let's go back to Ilah and understand what Ilah in Hinduism, Ilah can change from male to female and vice versa. So it says here, as a woman, Ilah married Buddha, the god of the planet Mercury and the son of the lunar deity Kshatriya, which Kshatriya means moon god. So Ilah married Buddha, or Buddha Graha, which Buddha Graha is the god of Mercury. Now it says here, Buddha in Punic mythology is also a deity. He is also known as Soumya, son of the moon. So what these researchers have not put together or are not telling you is you have El, Saturn god, the god of Saturn, and Ilah, El Elah, which they changed to Al Ilah. Now the thing is, when people start seeing this Ilah, they started separating it, which they should, as the moon god. But when they seen it in reference with El, they figured it was another name for El, knowing that it had to deal with the moon. There's no way you can separate the two. You can't see Ilah and think it's another name for El, which is why I don't know why they put that there. But Ilah is the moon. So you have El Ilah, and what they don't understand that the ancients had already figured out was the connection between the moon and the planet Saturn. When you start studying it with the knowledge of ancient Egyptian mythology, it shows you how much Greek mythology copied from ancient Kemet. It shows you exactly what the ancient Greeks admit themselves, that one, they was going into ancient Kemet. They were studying and learning with the Egyptians. And when you pay attention to Greek mythology, you can see that they was taking that information and bringing it back to ancient Greece and basically setting up systems with this information, with this knowledge. And it was sort of esoteric when you pay attention, because you have with ancient Egyptian mythology the hidden meanings behind the gods, as I have shown you through the videos about how we can look at certain gods and deities and ascribe them to parts of the body, or to celestial events, or to nature itself. And the Greeks was doing the exact same thing, taking these powers, these principles of reality, nature that exist, and bringing them into Greek culture, creating these stories and mythologies, just like the ancient Egyptians, and putting these stories out there. Now, one of the things is, when you go back and you study the ancient world, and one of the reasons why this is really important, this series, is so that you can see that we can go back far. Further we go back, the more we see that so many different civilizations had mythologies. We find so many different civilizations throughout the world, some with remnants, artifacts, what have you, claiming to be much older than ancient Kemet. The thing is this: there is no two ancient civilizations on this planet that we have discovered that we can find as much information about as ancient Greece and ancient Kemet. And you have to think about this, because one, we know we can go back 3000 BCE with ancient Kemet, Narma, 3000 BCE. I mean, that's long. And it seems as if when you get to about 1000 BCE, you start getting in Greek mythology, the Greek culture. You start hearing about these Greek myths. And we can't find any other culture that we can follow so far back and have so much detail. We're talking about what the Homer, Odyssey, the Iliad, the whole world of Greek mythology and Greek stories, from the Orphic Theogonies, as I'm going to talk about, Hesiod, his Theogonies. I mean, this stuff is old. We're talking about 1000 to 700 BCE in this time frame. We can't find nothing else from no other culture or civilization on this planet that dates back so far with so much information. Think about that. So when we get into the whole conversation about, conquering, about civilizations that was conquered, how information was lost and burned, or what have you, this is one of the reasons. But again, you got to pay attention to the fact that for somehow, the Greek and ancient Egyptians, their whole theology, their whole history, a lot of it survived. Now, the ancient Egyptians, because one, they put it in stone, and the stuff was so beautiful and so important that they couldn't dare destroy it all. They took away what they could take away. They hid what they hid, and we have what we have. But we've been able to piece together large parts of what we have today. Now, in Greek mythology, and what you're going to see in this video, and what you're going to understand by the end of it, is how much we are immersed in the same story over and over again. It's going to make a lot more sense later in a second, but it's amazing. And the main point is you have to really figure out, and this is going to show you clear by the end of this video, who exactly is in power and what exactly they are doing and how crazy it is. There's a lot of stuff people are not seeing and not realizing when you pay attention to Greek mythology, when you pay attention to the stories that we have been told, the information that's out there, and you start to put it in context with everything else. And then slowly the picture starts to reveal itself and you start to see what's going on. Now, you have many people talking about Sumer, ancient Mesopotamia, and all these other ancient places that people want to proclaim, is older than ancient Kemet, and a lot of places, not saying that, ancient Egypt was the oldest, the first civilization or what have you, because we know that's not true. But it's a reason. It's a reason why. We can talk about all these other ancient civilizations, but it's a reason why they go back to Kemet. Ancient Kemet is the most researched thing in all of history, in all of recorded history. There is nothing that has been researched more than ancient Egypt. Nothing that has been copied more than ancient Egypt. As I've shown you guys, we owe so much of our system, the things we have from, toys, dolls, board games, all the way up to sports, we find back in ancient Kemet. So there has been no other civilization in the history of mankind that we know of that has been copied more than ancient Kemet, that has been mimicked. I mean, look, Freemasonry. Everything that entails comes from ancient Kemet. So much has been stolen. These people that's studying the doctrine of the occult and all these esoteric, books and meanings, this stuff goes back to ancient Kemet. It doesn't come from Sumer and Mesopotamia or, the Mayans, the Olmecs, or what have you. And when you go back and start looking at a lot of these civilizations that people are talking about, the information we can trace back to ancient Kemet, as I have been showing you guys. So it's a reason why they fixated on ancient Kemet. It's a reason why they put that pyramid on the back of the dollar bill. The reason why everything that we see is, we could trace it back there, is because there's something about that civilization. And from my research, to me, it is the last remnants of the civilization of who the ancient Egyptians called the gods, the ones with power. It's the same thing when you get into Greek mythology that they are talking about. So you have this line to where you have this civilization of ancient Egyptians who they say, and the Greeks say, that before these people, somehow in Kemet, before they came, there was this civilization or these gods, these beings that ruled before the dynasties, before Norma, before the people who we know from ancient Kemet that we have been studying over the years, that they talk about before them were the gods. And it's so weird how the Greeks put it, same type of way, that you have this world of the gods before men was created. And it's so many different stories, all with esoteric meanings about how we came about that you really got to dig into. But again, a lot of people want to talk about these ancient civilizations. It's a reason why, and as you're going to see in this video, when you pay attention, one, it all goes back to ancient Greece. And we know the Greeks stole it from ancient Kemet, so it goes back there. So it's a lot of stuff people are missing. The original man, the melanated people of the planet, is somehow, put in this prison, this situation where we are not allowed to progress in any areas as far as, intellectual advancement or any type of advanced civilization. We have been enslaved and oppressed, for a reason. And it just goes back to what I was saying. I mean, think about it. You have the Greeks, you have the Romans talking about the ancient Egyptians, how great and mighty they were, about the Greeks and Romans coming in there to learn and study with the Egyptians. Think about what they was able to do and accomplish. Think about what they could have brought to the people, what they was trying to do. Think about who in their right mind would cause the collapse of such a civilization and a people. So much they did to help, so much information and knowledge that they had. Why would you want to cause the downfall of these people who never raised their hand to no other civilization or group of people? They was fixated on one thing. Knowing who they were, being spiritual people, and figuring out what took place, what happened, how to get it back. They wasn't in a position to where they was trying to go out and conquer the planet, as we see with the Europeans. So why take down that civilization? Everything that we see with the fall of Kemet and the information, the knowledge, just the way it was left, was as if, we can't use it. I mean, you got to look at it that way, because that's exactly what it was. So the only way you would cause the downfall of that civilization is if it does not benefit you. If you can't get out of it what you want out of it, but you don't want nobody else to get something out of it either. And that's exactly what happened. By the same token, you can ask the question, you are now in possession of the greatest civilization that you have ever known. You have it. You conquered it. It's yours. Why not keep it? Why not hold on to it? And, basically they kind of sort of did, and they still own it. And, they kind of sort of still use it when you understand that situation. But the reason why the Europeans, of course, couldn't keep it and rule it and be the face of Kemet is, of course, because of the heat. And the fact that other surrounding civilizations knew who the ancient Egyptians was. And just the simple fact of keeping that kingdom and that system going would keep resonating with us Africans. Keep us in the knowledge and understanding that that's us, that's our power, not yours. You just conquered it. So what is it you're trying to hide from us? So it's better that we leave this stuff. Don't tell nobody about it. Don't talk about it. Don't teach the Africans about it. Just, twist it. Make them be unsure of the situation in ancient Egypt, which is what they did. See, they couldn't be there. White men can't be there in that heat, excavating. You heard about the so-called curse of the mummy, what kept happening to those Englishmen when they was down there. They was dying from cancer, strokes, and all kinds of stuff because of the heat. So if you own the Arabs, if you run in Islam, that system, you can have the Arabs, go in there, excavate. They can withstand the heat. And since you own that system, since you control Egyptology and these people that's running the country, the artifacts that's found, the information that's found, you can keep under wraps. You can keep the cover up going because you run these people. This is one of the reasons why they let the Arabs in and did not allow us to go back into ancient Egypt to figure out what was there, to uncover it and then have the knowledge, because they knew how important it was. So they secured it for the Arabs and keep it away from us. And that's clear. So it's telling you. I mean, I go back to Kemet a lot. I keep telling people, you guys got to follow what I follow. But everything is pointing there for a reason. It's telling you where to go with the study. Everything falls back to these two groups, the Greeks and the ancient Egyptians, and what was going on. The Greeks taking us into the future. And following anything that they doing is like, what's the point? Well, we need to be staying with the ancient Egyptians and what they was trying to figure out in the past. That's the key, which, we get into. But it's definitely important to understand that fact, that they did exactly, what they always do. And when I'm giving you guys the Bible series and talking about in Exodus and Deuteronomy and Leviticus and what have you, in Numbers, the spoils of war, and I'm basically using that same MO, going into these civilizations, conquering and taking off with the information, what they can use to keep, building their empire. So even when you look it up in the Bible, from Exodus 12:36, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they let them have their requests. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. And again, where in the Bible, where in that story do you see especially in Exodus, where do you see in the story of the Israelites and the Egyptians where the Israelites are basically taking the Egyptian shit? You don't see that. So again, this is another hint of them talking about themselves, the Greeks. The Greeks are the ones who plundered the Egyptians. There's no proof. There's nothing to show that Israelites plundered ancient Kemet. It says the sons of Israel captured the women of Midian and their little ones, and all their cattle and all their flocks and all their goods they plundered. So, it's just giving you the same MO of what the Greeks have been known to do. Conquer civilizations, steal their stuff, keep moving. And the Israelites, as I talk about in the Bible series, being the Greeks. It's going to make a lot of sense as we go on. All this stuff going to come together. Trust me. This is something that people really need to understand and see and make that connection. Because there's a lot of people who still are not sold on the ancient Greeks being the ones behind all of this. And not really getting that understanding that we're talking about the same people here when we're talking about the Romans, when we're talking about the Germans, when we're talking about any other Europeans. They're Europeans. It doesn't matter. They are in this together, whether you believe it or not. Everything else, it's a song and a dance. It's all politics bullshit. All to keep the veil, cover over our eyes about what's really going on and what these beings are really trying to do on this planet. A lot of people by now should understand that Greek mythology, as we know it, basically is giving us astrology. It's giving us the planets. It's giving us everything that's dealing with the mind, body, and spirit. Greek mythology, all these characters are characters that represent these things. Mainly, of course, the planets, the astrology, and what have you. We know the moons of Saturn, just about all of them is named after Greek gods. Many of the planets after Greek and Roman gods. So we understand that you had Greek mythology, which later we have Roman mythology, which is all basically piggybacking off Egyptian mythology. So when you get into all that, as we talked about, this is all astrology and really breaking that down and understanding, which we're going to really get into deeply in this video because it's something huge that people is missing when you think about the concept of this Greek mythology and why these stories exist. So we look at these characters and we have all been, taught at some point in our life about the Greek mythology and these Greek characters. And you got to wonder, like, why did they pound this stuff home, throughout school about Greek mythology and these Greek characters? People don't understand DC. DC Comics is based off of Greek mythology. If you watch the Wonder Woman movie, it was talking about Greek mythological things, dealing with Hades and dealing with Ares and dealing with, Zeus, and all this stuff is Greek mythology that we're still seeing today. So it's been pounded into us, and a lot of people don't really get the esoteric understanding. So we know when you look at the astrologers, we look at math, science, astrology, biology even, and everything that's dealing with, intelligent learning that we learn from school on up, it always goes back to Greek people. It goes back to Aristotle and Thales and Pythagoras and so on. But we know that these guys went to the Egyptian mystery schools. They studied in Kemet, which they spoke about themselves. So Kemet and the Egyptians are not given credit for teaching this knowledge and putting this knowledge out. Automatically, this stuff goes back to Greek. And it's one of the things you got to pay attention to with the English language, dealing with Greek and Roman, Latin. So when you go and look at the grammatic, they says it was going back to grammatic. People automatically associate that with Germany, which still stems from out of the language stems from out of Greek and Roman mythology, or Greek and Rome languages. So when you start doing the etymology and looking back, you'll understand that it's a Greco-Roman collaboration that really gave us the grammatic language in English, which is why you look at Greek letters, you see English letters like A. Talked about this in That's Game, Bible Christianity Finally Explained. So all of this, bringing us back to Greek, which we know is going to bring us back to Kemet. So understanding this, we understand that what we know today as far as our learning process, we getting from the Greeks, who basically lied and covered up everything. So we got to understand, as I said before, they begin teaching us the way they are, to get us to stop being spiritual and to get us to asking questions and trying to figure things out. As I said, they didn't understand how to feel. So they tried to rationalize everything the Egyptians was doing. And this is why they could never understand anything until much later, because they were trying to rationalize spirituality, which is what we are doing. When we say spiritual, we got to go to a textbook or a history book to understand what's being said and look at the scholarship of things instead of just filling it out and understanding what's true and what's real. And now the Greeks have a hold on all of this because of, them, taking control and being the ones who implemented the learning process for us. So when you're arguing this whole thing, and that's one of the things we're going to really get into, because you being a person, a defender of truth, you have to know the information that's in this video. This is going to be real good scholarship for you guys that's going to allow you to super be able to crush biblical religion. If you're getting into debates, this is a video you want to see if we're going to be debating, because it's going to be crazy how we crush a lot of stuff in this video. So one of the things to understand that you have, as I said, all this stuff is going back to the Greeks and, philosophy. Philosophy is like under Greeks, plain and simple. When we look up philosophers, you're going to see Greeks, 100% of the time. And, philosophy, philo, Sophie. So it's two different words. You have philo, which means love or brother, and you have Sophie, Sophia. Sophie, it means basically wisdom or knowledge. So philosophy basically means a lover of wisdom or a lover of knowledge, or brother of wisdom or brother of knowledge. And we know Sophie or Sophia is the god in the Gnostic text. If you study Gnosticism, you understand who Sophia is, the god mother. And again, the Gnostics believe what? That it's about wisdom and getting this knowledge. And that's how you move forward, by having a certain amount of gnosis, of knowledge. So understand from the beginning, just the word philosophy, when you get into studying religion, philosophy is a part of that, but it always has to deal with knowledge. And that's what all this stuff is about. The gods and understanding angels and everything always deals with the mind, deals with studying your own brain, yourself. The Egyptians said, know thyself. And it's all wrapped up in this little, philosophy thing, to where you have to decipher different things to understand, what they're talking about. But it's all stemming from, the Egyptians. So in putting this stuff together and then arguing this whole thing, there's one thing you got to understand. Basically, there is the Greeks before the conquest of Kemet, and then the Greeks after the conquest of Kemet. So the Greeks before the conquest of Kemet didn't know much. It's clear as day. We've seen them come into Kemet, the ones who was allowed to come in, because remember, everybody couldn't come into the mystery schools and learn. We know Thales, Pythagoras, they came out saying, hey, We learned this from the Egyptians. And then their concepts is clearly from the Egyptians, because before the fall of Kemet, the Greeks didn't have a concept of a good afterlife. So they didn't have a concept of judgment and then a so-called heaven. Their concept of the afterlife was, death was the worst thing. You die and you go to this place. And now you're in this place and it's just the worst. And when you start looking at these stories of Homer and Hesiod, the theogonies of Hesiod, or Hesiod, how you want to pronounce it, you can see clear as day their concept and what they believe, especially in a lot of Homer's writing. And you can see how death was. And it was like, even if he was good, everybody went to the same place. So now it says here, just going to scroll down here, it's giving a reference, it's saying the early Jewish concept of Sheol, which is hell, and the later Christian concept of heaven and hell were partly based on the Greco-Roman belief of Hades. In the 4th century BC, the Greeks thought the blessed went to paradise-like Elysian field. One of the first people to suggest that after death the soul was freed from the flesh and there was a judgment in which the blessed were selected for the Elysian fields was Plato. The concept of Hades is closely associated with the myth of Orpheus. See Orpheus and Eurydice and Demeter and Persephone under myths, which we're going to get into Plato a whole lot, because Plato plays a big role in all of this. So understand, once they did come up with this concept of heaven, it was called the Elysian Fields. We've seen a movie called Elysium with Matt Damon, where Elysium was nice and beautiful. Earth was messed up, was hell, if you really pay attention to what they're trying to tell you. And then Elysium was out in space. That was heaven, which you get that. So the Elysian Fields is what they came up as Greek. And this is long after. This is later during the life of Plato. So during the time of the Egyptians, the 4th century, again, there wasn't no concept of no real afterlife until the conquest of Kemet. So I was talking about the 4th century when they really started coming into this information. The more they went in and out the mystery schools and came back to Greece with the knowledge, things changed as far as their understanding of life and death. So you have this concept with the Elysian Fields, which will be heaven. And what they're telling you about Eurydice and Orpheus is the story of Eurydice and Orpheus. A lot of guys know it. A lot of you may know it. It's one of the saddest stories in Greek mythology. Real quick, I'll go through it. You have Orpheus and Eurydice getting ready to get married. As they, walk into the altar, she gets bitten by poisonous snakes. She falls dead, goes to hell, or that's where everybody go, Hades. So he goes to, I'm paraphrasing, long story short, goes to Hades and basically begs Hades and his wife to let her go. And Hades says, okay, well, you can take her, because he played music so well and they love the music. So he said, you can take her. All you have to do is walk out of here and don't look back. Don't look back to check and see if she's behind me. Have faith that she's behind you and keep walking. Don't check back to see if she's behind you. Just keep walking out of there. If you do that, she'll be free. So right before he getting ready to get out of there, his dumb ass turned around and looked. And then, she was trapped there forever. So he roamed the earth, basically playing music. And it's like these witches that was mad that he didn't want them, and they basically killed him. And he ends up going to Hades to be with Eurydice. So the point of that is, like, this is a good guy who had love in his heart and everything like that. How is it that he dies and goes to Hades? The same thing with Eurydice. He was a good woman. How is it that she dies and go to Hades? The concept it's giving you is that everybody, no matter what, good or bad, goes to Hades when you die. So that's to get you to understand that they didn't have a concept of a judgment and a good, like a heaven, until later when you have Plato giving us the Elysian field. But think about what I just read and how I read it. What does that sound like to you? Same concept of the Bible. I understand these are translations. So a lot of stuff we're going to hear sounds like biblical stuff, because remember, the Greeks wrote the Bible. Now we're saying here, Plato on the immortality of the soul. Again, this is Plato. Plato wrote in Meno. It's 81 Socrates. I have heard from wise men and women who told of things divine. They were certain priests and priestesses who have studied as so to be able to give a reasoned account of their ministry. And Pindar also, and many other poets of heavenly gifts. As to their words, they are these. Mark now, if you judge them to be true. They say that the soul of man is immortal, and at one time comes to an end, which is called dying, and at another is born again, but never perishes. And here's the source, it's Plato. It's a lot of the writers we have of Plato. But think about how it's worded here. It sounds like biblical stuff. Also understand priests and priestesses. People think that, we didn't get priests until Rome came into power. It's the stuff they was talking about back then. And the concept of the immortal soul, which of course they got from understanding the ancient Egyptians. So you have this, as I said, before the fall of Kemet, you have after Kemet fell, and you have, basically during this time, you have practicing philosophers that we call Greeks, because they are practicing philosophers at this point, trying to understand this information. Now, it says here, used to be in the afterlife. In the same way that one had to remember one's duty towards another in one's life, one also had to remember one's duty to those who had departed life. If one forgot to honor and remember the dead, one was considered impious, and which impiety is a big deal. They executed Socrates because of it. While this particular breach of social conduct was not punished as severely as Socrates' breach, it was certainly frowned upon severely. Today shall one consider the tombstones of the ancient Greeks, whether in a museum or just below the Acropolis in Athens, one finds stones with comfortable common scenes depicted. A husband sitting at the table as his wife brings him his evening meal, a man being greeted by his dog upon returning home. These simple scenes were not merely depictions of moments the deceased enjoyed in life. They were meant to remind the living viscerally of who that person was in life, of who that person still was now in death, and to spark the light of continued remembrance in order that the dead shall live in bliss eternally. In ancient Greece, death was defeated not by the gods, but by the human agency of memory, which if you study Plato, for those of you who study Plato, one of the biggest things he always talked about was not being remembered, that death, that was the true death. It's remembrance. This is a big esoteric deal, and understanding it would take too long to get into why this is important with memory. This is one of the reasons why I put these videos out, and we get into this. Some of you may understand, but I can't give this away if you understand, what that means. You have to get this. So memory is everything. And real quick, so remember, there's talking about the tombs, which we still do to this day. Now you understand where that comes from. This is ancient. We look at this stuff today, and a lot of people are not grasping that we're talking about ancient old stuff that goes back to the Greeks. These cemeteries, even the concept of a cemetery is Greek. It's Greek the way we have it today. What did the Egyptians do? We still do that today too, because that's where the Greeks got it from. So when you see them talking about the memories on the tombstones, remember, what did the Egyptians have? The tombs. And you go down there, and what's in the tombs? The person's life. It's down there. It's on the walls. And again, I told you to think about that. It's a tomb that's supposed to be sealed off. Why would they take the time to draw this stuff that's not going to be seen by the person that's deceased or nobody else, supposedly? So understand memory, recalling, and how there is this attachment that you need to have, which is basically knowledge when you understand. It again goes into selling your soul, to the devil, the whole thing with the whole music industry thing. It's because it's important when you die to be remembered. The Greeks, they couldn't just go in and conquer Kemet. They couldn't go in there and just do that because they had people living there. They had this connection with them. Trade, knowledge, everything they was getting out of Kemet. The people was going in there learning so much, and they couldn't just do what they've done. Now, I've elaborated on what could have possibly happened because, of course, we're going to look at it. and we're going to say conquest. So when you get into it at the top, it's like, who told the Greeks to do what they did? There's no way they just, came into Kemet stupid. We had to teach them astrology, math, science, so on and so forth. And they amassed this strategy and this kind of thinking to outwit, outsmart, overthrow the ancient Egyptians on such a massive scale. So they got to think about that, one. Two, I talked about how the Egyptians changed the burial situation, where they are now being buried at the Valley of the Kings, and the old ways they went down to basically say, I'll be back. They stopped doing that. And Temple of Osiris says, don't come back here. So we don't know if it was some sort of changing of power that only the people at the top knew. And the Greeks had orders from whoever at the top to do what they've done, because it's just nothing fits but that when you really think about it. So they were smart enough to hide behind the Persians. And this is their MO, their motive of operation that we've been seeing since then. This is how we know it's the same people. They are like, the Sith. Perfect people to put them with, the Sith. Because you don't know who's at the top of the Sith. Remember, they didn't know if you watch Star Wars. They had no clue. So the Sith, he's hiding behind the Senate, but he's really a Dark Lord of the Sith, which is only two. And he's running everything. Palpatine was running everything when you pay attention. But he was really this Dark Lord that they were supposed to be fighting against. So he's hiding behind the Senate. And then he has the stormtroopers, and then he has these other galactic empires, these other empires that can do his dirty work and his bidding, but nobody knows that it's really this Sith Lord behind the scenes controlling everything. It is what they have done, these, let's just call them white folks at the top. So you have with the Greeks at this time using the Persians. So they're basically going to set up a deal with the Persians, gave the Persians the keys to the back door. And if you can imagine back then, if the Egyptians are hip to the Persians coming in trying to conquer, they have to set up a strategy. And it would be in the best interest of the Greeks to join with the Egyptians to know what you guys going to do, because they might come and try to invade us. So we want to help you guys and be with you guys. So now the Greeks know what the Egyptians are going to be planning, and they can alert the Persians, which made it real easy for the Persians to come in and conquer. Persians come in and conquer. Remember, all of the reports of the war between the Greeks and the Persians were like that. Said Alexander wasn't even there. They basically handed them the keys to Egypt. And you would think, if the Greeks and the ancient Egyptians were cool as they have seemed to be when you look at history, why would they allow this to happen? Why would they not give back power to the Egyptian people, so on and so forth? So we got to look at all this. So Alexander, basically gets hand over the keys to Kemet. They don't return over to the people. It's, reports that was talking about how the people of Kemet liked him and how he might have had a change of heart or mind or what have you to the way things was going to go. And that's why he was killed, because he was definitely killed. There is a hieroglyph, a carving, a relief of Alexander in Kemet. Multiple civilizations spoke of him, so the dude did exist, and it's a myth as to where his body ended up at. So nobody really knows. But there's a lot to the history. I dug into this a little bit and talked about how they supposedly found his body in Illinois in America, along with a bunch of Egyptian artifacts and some queen and what have you. We don't know if that was true or not. So a lot to that. But what ensued was the War of the Successors, or the War of the Diadochi. And we had these African lands basically taken over by the Greeks. So eventually Rome would come into power, and then Rome would basically seemingly defeat the Greeks. But we're going to get into this. It's a deep stuff to this. But yeah, and they come into power. But we have to look at what happens next, because again, talk about this, how Rome had their civilization, their customs set up the way that they wanted them. and they started to adopt the Greek mythologies and culture and custom Hellenization. They continued it in those territories. And we see Heracles change from Heracles to Hercules. And we see this whole adoption of Greek mythology and Roman mythology. So a lot of people don't know when this change happened, but it happened during this time. But we can find, a lot of these Roman mythological figures before the conquest of the Greeks, which shows they had some type of interaction with each other. And the issue with all this is it should be obviously clear. One, we don't have the original Septuagint. We can't prove the story of LXX is true because LXX has been since proven to be a Jewish forgery. And I talked about Hecataeus and how all the information on the ancient Jews is pseudo. Nobody has any real information on them as if they didn't exist. We have these facts. We have the fact that when you go back and look at ancient Greek mythology, we find biblical stories, which I'm going to show you even deeper in this video. So nobody is, caring about this information because we've been brainwashed and taught the Bible the way we've been taught it. And even if you was to put this information out, nobody really cares except for people that's into what we are into. And they don't understand how this information is important to really unlock the keys to us and understand history and our history. And to really unlock the key to yourself, you need to understand what happened in our history, understand why this stuff is important, and what information they was holding on to that was important, that pertains to us. What is it? What is it about us? What's going on? So all this stuff is important. The mythologies, the history is important to know and understand. And the more you dig into it, the more you unlock information, as you probably figured out on your own. So this history, if you was to go back and find information before biblical religion that's basically showing it existed before biblical religion, it would change your mind about the Bible, right? So anybody who does their research, you have found it. You have went out and you have found clear, concrete information that shows the biblical stories in the Bible must have come from the Greeks. Had to, because this stuff is before. Now, if you want to believe the Bible and believe Moses and the Levites, and he wrote this whole Torah out, and it was an oral Torah, and they had all this information, and that the biblical stories happened before Greek mythology, we can't prove none of this, then you will believe that the Greeks copied from, real life, because there was no Bible yet. So this stuff can be, 1000 BCE, and there was a Bible for them to get this information. They're in two different locations. There's no way they should know what they know unless it's what happened to them. So then you have a decision to make. Do you believe the Greeks or do you believe the Bible? More information and proof supports the Greeks than the Bible. So we talked about the Garden of Hesperides story, and anybody who's looked into this story can clearly see that this is where the Garden of Eden story must have come from. It's very similar to the Garden of Eden story. And again, as I said, most people look at it and say, well, the Garden of Eden story is, first, but we can't prove that it's first if we're going to go into mythology or biblical history and take that as fact, then it's first. But in proven history, in this real world, there is nothing biblical that predates the story. So in the Garden of Hesperides story, for those of you who have looked, we see you have the serpent in the tree, you have the apples of immortality, you have the story with Heracles, which would be Hercules, and Noah is also in this story, by a different name, which we'll get into in a second. But the biggest part is understanding that, this story, the Garden of Hesperides, begins with two people, and we have Zeus and Hera. So it says here, Zeus and Hera, the first couple according to the Greeks, seated together on the east frieze of the Parthenon from about 435 BC. The Judeo-Christian tradition considers Adam as the father of all humanity. The term Father Zeus is a description of the king of the gods that appears over 100 times in the ancient writings of Homer. According to the ancient poet Hesiod, Zeus is the father of God's men, the gods being deified ancestors. Genesis 3:20 describes Eve as the mother of all the living. In a hymn of invocation, the 6th century BC lyric poet Alcaeus refers to Hera as mother of all. As the first wife, the Greeks worshipped Hera as the goddess of marriage. As the first mother, the Greeks worshipped her as the goddess of childbirth. Both the Judeo-Christian traditions and the Greek religious tradition insist that their respective first couples came out of an ancient paradise with a serpent-entwined fruit tree. Two opposite spiritual standpoints, the former looking to the Creator as the source of truth, and the latter looking to the serpent for it, share the same factual basis. Again, this is something you're going to see because people are very careful about what they say that's in the professional field, especially pertaining to history. So they don't want to risk their credentials. They don't want to risk their position, their jobs, or what have you, saying the wrong thing that's going to offend people in power. So everybody know, don't say nothing about the Jews, don't say nothing pertaining to them, but you still got a job to do. So it's clear as day, they know, anybody that's a real researcher understands that clearly this, story is first. This Greek story comes before the Adam and Eve story, and we don't have anything that's concrete that, shows that it came, before the Garden of Hesperides. Now, we know that this stuff is older. We have the pottery. A lot of these stories, we have Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, of course, but we still have a lot of ancient Greek artifacts because the civilization still stands, still exists. So the pottery is in museums. They still find this stuff to this day. These stories were put on pottery. When we find them, you've seen them. So it says here, ancient Greek vase artists painted images of biblical figures, Noah and Nimrod, over 2,000 years ago. And Nimrod, as you will understand, will be Heracles or Hercules, same person. The book of Genesis describes human history. Ancient Greek religious art depicts human history. While their viewpoints are opposite, the recounted events and characters match each other in convincing detail. This brief article focuses on how Greek religious art portrayed Noah and how it portrayed Nimrod and his successful rebellion against Noah's authority. So understanding, wait a minute, how is it that we have the story of Noah? You'll see the different name, Noah, in Greek mythology. How is this possible? So in this story, it's a post-flood story where you basically have Heracles or Hercules trying to gain back, the planet for the mortals, trying to gain it back. And he's trying to get the apples of immortality to do so. So it says here, Heracles goes for the apples. The seated man on the vase to our right of the tree is Nimrod/Heracles. The goal of Nimrod/Heracles in the post-flood world was to push Noah and his God out of the picture, dispatch those who disagree with his own mankind exalting rule, and get back to the ancient garden for another bite of the serpent's apple. It's anti-creator enlightenment and the promise of immortality without God. Sounds familiar, right? On a vase depiction from, this is 450 BC, Nimrod/Heracles makes off with the apple as one of the Hesperides gestures for him to stay with them. And this is Nereus, or the Greek Noah. The Greeks knew exactly who Noah was. They call him Nereus, the wet one, the Hellas Guron, the salt sea old man. Above, we see three different depictions of Nereus from ancient Greek vases. On all three, he looks very old. He is seated as if on a throne, and he holds a scepter, a symbol of rule. The simple artistic communication. Here is the old man who ruled. Genesis 6:9 speaks highly of Noah's character. Noah is a just man, flawless, became he in his generations. With God walks Noah. The ancient Greek poet Hesiod says essentially the same thing about Nereus. But Pontos, the great sea, was father of truthful Nereus, who tells no lies. Eldest of his sons, they call him the old gentleman because he is trustworthy and gentle and never forgetful of what is right. But the thoughts of his mind are mild and righteous. Goes on to say, and remember this depiction of him holding that rod in his hand. Says, Nimrod Heracles usurps the authority of Noah Nereus. Nimrod Heracles begins his serpent and mankind exalting rebellion by nullifying the authority of Noah. The prophet of God who brought humanity through the flood had to be pushed out of the picture and his rule brought to an end. Above, on a red figure bobbing, Nimrod Heracles knocks Noah Nereus, who holds the scepter of rule, out of the way, invalidating his authority and replacing it with his own. Heracles wears the lion's head and carries his club as signs of his great prowess. He forces Noah to drop the fish, a sign of his now disrupted authority in connection with the flood. So remember, the lion's head and the club, we're going to come back to this later to make a point. It says, after the flood, God instructed mankind to be fruitful and increase and fill the earth and subdue it. That's Genesis 9:1. That included subjecting every living animal of the earth, all of the fishes of the sea, and every flyer of the heavens. Greek art portrayed Heracles as the master hunter, doing exactly that in a post-flood world. First three labors of Hercules, and we heard about the labors of Hercules. I talked about this before, but these are the first three labors of Heracles. And the reason why Rome took over it and brought out Hercules is to cover the story up, because we see more of Hercules, the Roman side, than the Greek side, because we know of Hercules and not Heracles, but that's more Roman. But we know about the labors of Hercules. The first three labors of Nimrod, Heracles, reconstructed above by Holmes Bryant as they appear on the temple of Zeus at Olympia. Boasts of his conquest of the most powerful animals of the land, water, and air: the lion of Nemea, the fearsome hydra of Lima, and the vicious man-attacking bird of the lake, Symphalis. Athena accompanied him on all three of these labors, although the sculpture had no room for her in their depiction of him killing the water monster. So to me, clear as day, simple. You take the story from Genesis, you take the story about Noah, take the story about Heracles, and then we know that the Romans took from the Greeks, and gave us Roman gods.